Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today we're taking a trip back in time, like 20 years back to
Wow.
2004, and we're going to revisit, I think, a pretty pivotal moment in music history, the release of Eminem's Encore.
Yeah.
So in 2004, Eminem, I mean, he was at the top of his game, a global phenomenon, hit albums, movies, Oscar,
Right.
9 Grammy Awards. You'd think, like, his next album, automatic slam dunk.
Oh, yeah. The sources really paint that picture.
Yeah.
Like sky-high expectations, top of the world.
So it's really fascinating to kind of look at what happened when Encore actually came out, because it wasn't the universal success everyone expected.
Right.
And in fact, like, it became his first truly divisive release. Do you remember how you felt about Encore back then? I'm kind of curious if your perspective has changed over time.
Yeah, divisive is a good way to put it. I mean, it wasn't a complete flop, obviously.
Right.
What, quadruple platinum. But yeah, the reviews were all over the place, really. Leaning toward negative, I'd say, which is so different from his earlier work, which, it was controversial, sure, but also generally, like, critically praised.
Yeah. And the sources actually list out some of the tracks that drew the most criticism.
Oh, yeah.
So we're talking Puke, Rain Man, Big Weenie, My First Single, and Ass Like That. Not exactly like subtle lyricism.
Not exactly subtle. Like if you have a delicious meal, but then someone throws in like some ingredients you really don't like.
Right.
Even if most of it's good, those bad parts really stick with you.
Yeah, it's like they taint the whole meal.
They really do.
And yet you also have tracks like Mockingbird and like Toy Soldiers
Oh, absolutely.
that that were praised at the time, still considered classics.
Mhm.
So it really leads to this interesting question, right? Like, can an album be both a critical flop
Yeah.
and a commercial success?
Mhm.
And what does that even say about how we define like good art? Is it about sales? Is it about critics? Or is it something else entirely?
It's so hard to pin down. I mean,
Yeah.
what makes an album good? Is it just like totally subjective? Is there some objective standard out there?
Yeah.
Who knows? It's a great question.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit because I want to get into Eminem's own explanation, right?
Okay, yeah.
For what happened with Encore. And the sources point to one really key factor: leaks. Apparently, several tracks leaked online before the album was released,
Oh, wow.
and he had to scrap like tons of material, rush to record replacements. And it's just like, think about the irony here, This artist who's known for pushing boundaries,
Yeah.
he's now boxed in by these external factors.
Totally. Makes you think how much creative freedom can an artist have when they're facing that kind of pressure?
Yeah. And speaking of like unexpected things,
Uh-huh.
there's a detail in the sources that I found really interesting. You remember the track Christopher Reeves?
Oh, yeah.
It got pulled from the album like just a month before release
Hmm.
because tragically the actor passed away.
Oh, wow. I mean, that must have been just like another layer of stress
Great.
on top of an already stressful situation.
Uh,
And just shows you how real life events can just like derail things, even for a superstar like Eminem.
yeah. But going back to the leaks, Eminem actually like directly blames them for the goofier aspects of Encore. I mean, there's this quote. He says, "If those other songs hadn't leaked, Encore would have been a different album." And he specifically points to Rain Man
Yeah.
and Big Weenie as examples of stuff he just had to like rush to create
Yeah.
because of those leaks.
It's interesting because it's not like he's using it as an excuse, right?
Yeah.
He's acknowledging the album's flaws,
Yeah.
but also giving it some context.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder about artistic integrity,
Yeah.
How do you keep that vision true when you're forced to change your plans?
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, like, what would that other album have sounded like? The one he wanted to make.
Right.
Would it have lived up to the hype?
$1 million question.
We'll never know.
And it's something that resonates in any creative field, really. I
Yeah.
mean, we all face compromises, unexpected challenges.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that pressure to compromise your own vision?
Oh, absolutely. All the time. And I can only imagine how much more intense it is when you're in the public eye like that.
Oh, yeah. The scrutiny that comes with Eminem's level of fame.
It's gotta be a lot to handle.
For sure. It's a delicate balance,
Yeah.
for sure. And in Eminem's case, it wasn't just the artistic pressure. I mean, he also had the weight of expectations
Oh, yeah.
from millions of fans around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like he became a victim of his own success, in a way.
Yeah, the higher you climb.
The further you can fall.
Exactly. And the sources really emphasize that, like the mixed reaction to Encore, it really marked a turning point in his career.
Right.
Like, before Encore, he was this unstoppable force, commercially, critically, but afterwards, things shifted.
Yeah, like Encore threw a wrench in the machine, you know?
It did.
It challenged people's perceptions of him as an artist, but also as a person, I think. And from what I got from the sources, it seemed like he really took the criticism to heart.
I mean, you have to think about how that impacts creative individuals.
Yeah.
How do you deal with all that negativity?
Yeah.
Especially when you're already dealing with your own personal struggles and then this massive weight of fame on top of it all.
It's a lot to process. But even with all its flaws, Encore still had a significant impact. I mean, it started conversations, it pushed boundaries, and made people think. And isn't that like part of what art's supposed to do?
Right. It's not always about pleasing everybody. Sometimes it's about provoking, about challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
And in that sense, Encore definitely succeeded.
I agree. It might not have been the album people expected,
Yeah.
but it definitely left its mark. And I think, looking back on it now, 20 years later, it's so important to acknowledge the context, right?
Yeah.
The leaks, the personal struggles, Christopher Reeve's passing. I mean, all of those things played a role in shaping the final product.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good reminder that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always a product of its time. Internal forces, external forces, all shaping it.
So true. And in the case of Encore, those forces, they kind of collided in a pretty spectacular, maybe messy way.
But isn't there a beauty in that messiness?
Yeah.
Like a raw honesty that you don't always find in a polished work.
I think you're right. There's a vulnerability in Encore. It's like you're seeing Eminem, warts and all.
Right.
And sometimes those imperfections are what make something truly relatable.
Like a crack in a perfect facade. You see the humanity underneath.
Exactly.
That's where the really interesting stories are.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive into Encore so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just the music, it's the story behind it, the struggles, the triumphs, the messy reality of creating something under pressure.
Makes you wonder, though, if Encore was released today, in the age of instant leaks and viral trends and all that, how would it be received? Would it just be dismissed? Like, oh, another celebrity meltdown? Or would it still have that power to provoke, to challenge?
Such a good question. And ultimately, I think that's up to each listener to decide.
Yeah.
Art is subjective. What resonates with one person might not resonate with another.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. There's no right answer. It's all about your own personal interpretation.
So what stands out to you the most about Encore? What's your biggest takeaway from this deep dive?
For me, it's a reminder that even the most successful artists, they're human. They make mistakes, they struggle, they have these moments of doubt. And sometimes those challenges, those struggles, lead to work that's flawed, but no less impactful.
I love that. I think that's a message that really resonates with all of us. Whether we're, artists, entrepreneurs, or just everyday people trying to figure life out, we all have our Encore moments, those times when things just don't go as planned.
It's how we learn from those moments, how we adapt and grow that really defines us,
So well said. And I think that's a great point to kind of transition into our final thoughts on Encore. I mean, it's clear that this album, with all its flaws and controversies, it's still sparking conversations and reflections even 20 years later.
It really is.
It really does make you think, like, how different it is for artists today.
Oh, totally.
Back then, leaks, they were like a huge disruption.
Yeah.
Potentially disastrous, right?
Yeah.
But now, with the way music's released and consumed, it's almost like leaks are just part of the process.
Yeah, just part of it.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Singles drop, all the time. Playlists are everything on Spotify.
Right.
And that whole idea of a meticulously crafted album experience, it's kind of evolved.
Right.
Would a couple of goofy tracks even be noticed in that kind of environment?
Yeah.
Would they, derail a career the way they might have back then?
Yeah, it's like the definition of a misstep has changed.
It has.
And then the way music is talked about, marketed, that's different now, too.
Oh, absolutely.
So in that context, Encore and all the controversy around it, it really feels like a relic of a bygone era.
It does. It feels like a time capsule almost.
Right.
Not just the music,
Right.
but the whole way we interact with music.
Right. The relationship's different.
Completely.
And it was just starting to change back then.
Yeah, those were like the early days of that shift.
Exactly. It's like the internet, democratized music in a way.
Yeah.
Everybody has a voice now. Artists are constantly engaging with their fans online.
Right.
It's a far cry from when, a physical album
Mm-hmm.
was the main way you connected with your audience.
It was like a one-way street back then.
Totally.
Now it's this back and forth, this constant feedback loop,
Right, right.
which, you know, it can be good, it can be bad. You get that intimacy, that connection,
Yeah.
but it can also amplify, like, the negativity
Oh, yeah.
and that pressure on artists to
Yeah.
just, like, cater to every whim of the fans. That's got to be intense.
So, to kind of start wrapping up our deep dive into Encore, it's clear that the album it's more than just a collection of songs, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's like a window into this specific moment in music history
Yeah.
when the industry was, wrestling with this rise of the digital age,
Right.
how that was changing the relationship between artists and their fans.
Totally. And Encore, it's like this reminder that artistic expression,
Yeah.
it's not always neat and tidy.
Right.
It's messy, it's shaped by all these different forces, and sometimes you end up with work that really challenges your expectations.
Yeah. For better or worse.
Exactly.
And in this world where, like, everything is analyzed and debated online,
Oh, yeah.
it's kind of refreshing to revisit an album that sparks such strong reactions. And it's still provoking conversation all these years later.
Definitely. Encore might not be Eminem's, most polished work, but it definitely shows his willingness to experiment, to push boundaries, to be vulnerable, even when all eyes are on him.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to leave everyone with a final thought to think about.
Okay.
Imagine you could, like, hop in a time machine, right?
Uh-huh.
Go back to 2004, sit down with Eminem,
Wow.
knowing everything we know now,
Yeah.
how his career played out, how the music industry evolved. What advice would you give him?
That's a great question.
What lessons from Encore do you think still apply today?
It's a good one to leave the listeners with.
Yeah, even though the music landscape is so different now.
Right, right. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yes.
and never stop learning.
It's a question that really makes you think, what could we tell a younger Eminem, knowing what we know now about the music industry, his career?
Yeah. It's tempting to want to give him some specific advice, like don't worry about those leads or focus on being genuine with your fans. But I think the real lesson from Encore goes beyond any specific strategy.
Oh, okay. I'm curious now. What are you thinking?
For me, it all comes down to resilience. Encore wasn't a hit with everyone. It got a lot of criticism, and it marked this big change in his career. But he didn't let it stop him. He learned, he grew as an artist, and he kept making music that people loved.
You're so right. He didn't shy away from the hard stuff, owned his mistakes, and used them to grow. It's a good reminder. Even the most successful people, they mess up. They have doubts.
It's true. And that's something everyone can relate to, right? Not just in music. Entrepreneurs, athletes, anyone going through life's ups and downs, we need resilience to bounce back, learn, and keep going, even when you're not sure what's next.
And, in a way, Encore is like proof of that, right? Those times when we don't succeed, we don't meet expectations, they don't have to define us. They can be a chance to grow, to change, to really understand ourselves and what we do.
Beautifully put. So as we move on from Encore, let's take that with us. Embrace the messiness of creating. Know that there will be setbacks. And remember, it's how we adapt, how we evolve that shapes our journey.
I love that. Encore may not be a perfect album, but it teaches us a lot. Resilience, knowing ourselves, and learning from every experience. Those are the things that help us navigate life. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Encore. It's been great exploring creativity, vulnerability, and how powerful resilience can be.
And maybe in 20 years, we'll be back, looking at some other big moment in music, finding those hidden gems, those lessons that keep teaching us about art and being human.
That's a great thought. Thanks for listening, everyone.